you didn't press record when I couldn't speak, but anyway, we are where we are. Okay, item 2, any apologies for absence? We've got one from Beverly Hendricks.
We have one from Beverly Hendricks and also from Rachel Lissauer.
Okay, and we've also got apologies for lateness from Jeffrey Ocean, who's just left a meeting down the corridor to run back to his office, so he said he'll be with us shortly. Any others from anybody? No? Okay, item 3, urgent business. Naz?
No urgent business, Chair.
Cool, okay. Item 4, declarations of interest. Are there any declarations colleagues need to make? No? Okay. Item 5, minutes from the meeting on the 13th of December. Now, you'll all recall I wasn't there for special reasons, so if anyone has any comments they want to make, Caroline can confirm because she chaired them. Any thoughts? Did a hand just go up there? No? Okay, so can we confirm those minutes then? Yes? Okay, thanks.
Yes,
Thank you. Fine. Item 6, membership. Colleagues will see the membership of the CSP in our papers, and that's just for noting, I believe, isn't it, Naz?
Yes, that's correct. Nothing further.
Cool. Okay. Item 7. Emma. Is Emma here?
I think she might be with Ofsted. I think Jackie DeFalco might also.
Fine.
Be with,
well, let's come back to that. I know we didn't formally vary the agenda, but we can take the others if colleagues are minded, and we can keep going and then come back. Was that all right? Yes.
Yeah. Yep.
I can see some face, so nod suffice. Okay. Item 8. Joe, are you ready to go?
Ready to go, Chair.
Thank you. Over to you.
Okay, I'm just going to share the presentation. Written slideshow? Yes. Okay. Oops, sorry. Okay, so this is an item from myself, Joe Benmore, Strategic Lead for Community Safety and Offender Management, and I'm joined by my colleague, Heather Hutchings, who's a Strategic Lead for Community Safety and Hate Crime. We just wanted to come back to the board today following, I think it was the last board meeting or the one before that, where we came to the board with a paper around the development of the community safety strategy and the hate crime strategy, both of which are in development currently and are due to be published later this year. And we were talking to the board about phase 1 of the development process, which was some pre-engagement that we were looking to undertake in December, and also to go through the various phases of the development of the strategy. So the reason we've come today really is just to give you an update, and there is a bit of an ask at the end as well, as you may imagine. So as you can see from the slide there, we are moving, we continue to progress, and we're now at the beginning of phase 3, which is the formal engagement phase. Both phase 1 and phase 2 have now been completed. We were at Cabinet on the 7th of February, where we, through the lead member for community cohesion, we requested permission to formally engage, and this will be a formal engagement period of up to 12 weeks. I'll go to the next slide, Heather.
Yeah, thanks, Joss. I'm just going to talk to you a little bit about phase 1 and what we did in terms of our pre-engagement. So our pre-engagement was in line with the Haringey deal. So essentially, we really wanted to get residents, communities, businesses' voice and experiences before any sort of formal engagement or consultation. And this is so that we know that actually what goes in our strategy reflects the real experiences and voices. So our pre-engagement was from the 5th to the 18th of December. The engagement spanned across a variety of mediums, reaching out to a wide range of audiences. We were really conscious, obviously, that we wanted to target the borough as an even spread. So we made sure that all engagement was really localised, with workshops and drop-ins in all different areas of the borough, from the east to the west. So the engagement consisted of mainly a survey. So it was essentially myself and Jo and some of our colleagues going out to residents groups, community groups, different forums that are already established in the borough, and reaching out to the public and asking them to fill in a survey and kind of giving them a bit of a helping hand, and capturing some of those views quite organically through discussions and conversations. We did hold a few workshops, one in the west and one in the east. And again, this was really brilliant to give that rich discussion of exactly what's going on and those thoughts and views of what's prevalent to people in those areas. We also targeted community centres, we had drop-in in libraries, and we also thought the Week of Action was a sort of a perfect outlet for us to engage with the service, with the surveys, with the people who came at the Week of Action hub. So that was essentially sort of our pre-engagement. We, myself and Jo found it to be really successful. It was only 2 weeks, but on that 2 weeks, we managed to get just over 104 surveys completed. But also, in addition to the surveys, we had quite a lot of qualitative information that's come from the workshops. And that's kind of what we want to replicate for the formal engagement, but obviously just hype it up on a mass scale and obviously be a bit more formal, going through formal routes. So that was the pre-engagement. In terms of the preparation of the cabinet report, as Jo's already referred to, that was prepared and held at cabinet on the 7th of February, so just a couple of evenings ago, where we got support. We got the permission to go to formal engagement.
So in terms of I think as Heather's just said, in terms of the engagement phase that we're in now, we've pulled together an engagement plan, and this will consist, in terms of the period of engagement, this will consist, as Heather said, around workshops, drop-ins. There will be questionnaires which will be sent via our website, where members of the public, obviously residents, can obtain copies. There'll also be leaflets in libraries and posters in community spaces, etc. What we're also really keen to do is to have some themed focus groups. So the idea around this is that around some of the priorities that we've identified, we'd like to kind of hold really sort of focused groups with, as you can see on the slide there, with youth groups, with women-only groups, faith groups, businesses and other key community groups in the borough, including the police and other stakeholders. And I think the idea of this is that we want to kind of really understand community safety from the perspective of those groups. So one of the asks today will be to get some support from partners in the Community Safety Partnership to support us around that. We've already had some discussions with Public Health around the VORG questions in the survey, and Public Health have kindly offered to support us in terms of delivering those themes groups. So really there'll be an ask coming out from us at some point to various members of this meeting and others to kind of help us around kind of planning some of those. I think, Heather, we're looking at around 12 workshops, and I think around the same number of drop-ins, around 6 drop-ins, I think, sorry. So Heather, is that right? Sorry, I haven't got the notes in front of me. I think it was around 12 anyway. Yeah, it will be up to 12. Oh, I can hear talking in the back. Is that a question? Sorry, I can't see any questions or hands. So
I think that was someone unmuted and a bit of.
Oh, okay. Sorry, apologies.
All good.
Okay, so as I said, this period of engagement will be for 12 weeks. Following that, there'll be a period of where we'll be looking to draft the community safety strategy and the hate crime strategy. This will need to come back to this board for agreement and for commentary, etc. And also it will go through a bit of a kind of a round robin of all the partners, all the key partners, to make sure they're happy with the final report. And then we're looking to get this cabinet sign off in sort of early summer, and we'll be looking to get the strategies ratified at full council before publishing in December. In the summer of 2023. Okay. So this was the ask that you saw at the beginning. So hopefully I'm sort of preempted this, but so in terms of today's presentation, it's really just that the Community Safety Partnership Board notes the contents of the accompanying report, which provides an update on the development of the respective community safety and hate crime strategies, and that all partners agree to support the engagement process by encouraging participation across their internal and external network stakeholders and partners. And also that partners agree to contribute to the engagement strategy and action plan as they continue to develop over the coming months. And I'll stop there and we'll take any questions.
Thank you, Joe. And, just to reiterate, this went to Cabinet on Tuesday evening, and I said in my introduction, I'm sure others had more important things to do than watch Cabinet, but, we want to make this work and mean something, and it will be meaningful engagement. So we'll be able to keep colleagues in the loop as and when that engagement plan is finalised and we're ready to go. So the main point is we want it to be real and meaningful, and we'll be in touch with relevant partners in the coming days just to make sure people's buy-in is there. Okay, we've got two hands up. One's Councillor Babazon, and then we've got Will. And
thanks, Adam. Just to say, I have to leave the meeting at 3:15, so I've got to go to the schools forum.
That's
so
fine.
I apologise
All good.
for that. Thank you. Just to say, in terms of the focus groups, I think talking to people in small groups is a better strategy than the general putting it on the website and all that stuff and post-its and all that business. So I fully support that. But I was just thinking about groups of people who would give a different insight, and I think it would be worth perhaps talking to people who live on council estates where there are communal doors and all that stuff, to talk to people about their experience of community safety. Because you remember down Northumberland Park, there was that whole business about, and I saw it for myself when I did a walk around there about a year ago. So people sleeping in the stairwells, the drug dealing going on, all the common parts stuff. So if there's some way of having a group of perhaps tenants and people who work in housing to share that, I think, because for community safety issues, that's quite important, it seems to me.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point, Zena. I mean, the aim is to make sure that we are in touch with as many of those relevant departments in the council and outside. And there's no reason why that can't be devolved when ultimately broken down to tenants reps, some of the associations. So that's really helpful.
I mean, maybe not some of the usual suspects who go to the meetings, but maybe some way of meeting people who are living in those blocks who really must feel sometimes quite abandoned.
Sure.
And
we'll take that away and see what that can look like. But there's definitely obviously a housing, an undeniable housing link to this. And you're right, many of the examples of ASB and criminality we see on in our community, often, not always obviously, but quite often happens on estates. So those tenants of ours are on the front line.
Yeah, okay.
That's it. Thanks, Ian.
I had another thought, but I'll leave it there for the time being.
No, go on, say if you like.
Well, I think elderly people are not included in the target groups, but of course elderly people are often targets for scams and all sorts of other things. I don't know whether through Reach and Connect or something like that, you may be well on top of elderly people. I'm thinking, there are people walk about who are really, really vulnerable. I don't know. Maybe that's something that anyway, but that was my other thought. And I am pleased to go and talk to young people. Yeah.
Well, I as I said in the cabinet strategy we did on this back in December, I think it was, we want to make sure that the cabinet colleagues, before we go out, obviously there's me going through things, speaking to parents and having wider conversations. So there'll be another chance to make sure that colleagues have that buy-in from the different places. Okay, Will.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Thank you very much, Joe and Heather and the team. It's such an important piece of work. I've already met with Joe and Heather and talked about how we're going to work together, which I think we've kind of thrust of the discussion is how we work together on the engagement, which I think is really, really important. I was just thinking in terms of health and wellbeing. So the Director of Public Health, I guess, is so fundamental to people's health and wellbeing, feeling safe, isn't it?
Yeah.
So I had a bit of a kind of question, so to kind of remit. So when we think of community safety, we often think of the kind of, I guess, community spaces. Even when we're talking about housing estates, we're talking about kind of outside the front door. But I suppose for me, there's three different places or locations where we have to consider safety, and it's just whether they're scoped into the strategy. So I think in one's own home, a lot of people are not feeling safe in the borough, and not because of people outside their home, because of people inside their own home and the conflict there. So inside your own home environment, then kind of wherever you go, where you're getting from A to B, so outside the front door, the estate, the streets, which I think is primarily the focus of the community safety strategy. And then the third area is kind of where we spend quite a lot of our time, is our workplace or school or college. And I know in schools and colleges, actually, quite a lot of people don't feel safe all the time. So it's just thinking about that in terms of scope of the strategy.
Yeah. Thank you. Well, that's a really good point, and yeah, we'll certainly think about that, and certainly in terms of how we frame the engagement as well. Just to get, because I'm really interested in hearing what community safety is like from members of the public's point of view. So it's all if people are coming back and saying, I don't feel safe in my home, what are we as a council going to do about that? And that will help to kind of formulate some of the action plans that we'll be developing around it.
Cool. Okay, thank you. Caroline.
Thanks, Adam. I just wanted to come in just a bit of a brief update on the Commissioner's turnaround plan and his new performance priorities for the coming year, which will come into effect properly from the 1st of April. And I think it will have a significant impact on how we focus our police resources and what areas we work on. And I know there's been some email conversations in the background around this, but I think it will align itself quite neatly to our strategy for Haringey.
Yeah.
And we need to make sure that we sort of overlay those two plans so that we can see what our opportunities are. In particular, it's interesting, Will, that you talk about public and private spaces, because that's one of the ways ours is going to be themed on the performance framework for the Met. So a lot of public space, domestic abuse, child abuse, and all those sort of things that happen within the home, versus all the street-based violence and other issues when people are away from their home. So I guess the point is, Joe, and I know we've had conversations by email outside, but that we're planning to workshop that together, aren't we? Just to make sure we're fully aligned. And if there are any gaps, I think it probably won't be any surprise to anyone, things that are coming out as our priorities. But I think there's a general acknowledgement in the Met that historically we focused quite a lot on the high end, high impact, understandably, but more serious violence, and the volume interactions are the areas where we haven't done perhaps what we should do around things like residential burglary, theft of motor vehicle, and all the other kind of ward-based crimes. And it's just about understanding where that falls in.
Balance.
Yeah.
I was going to say, Caroline, just before you comes in, we've already reached out. I think we've got a meeting with Dave Bradley coming up. But I'm happy to do you want me to come through you and maybe do it through you, and then you can get more of because there are a number of questions within the questionnaire that relate to public confidence. So I'd just like to be clear, kind of have some clarity with you about kind of how we frame those, kind of the best approach to those, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. So just in a nutshell, the Commissioner's been quite clear across various forums, and you've probably heard it already. It's more trust, less crime, higher standards. And within the organisation, everything that we do moving forward must fall in line with that strategy, and our performance framework is no exception. So more trust, less crime, higher standards will be a theme. So I think in terms of public confidence and shifting things like our public attitude survey, all the stop and search issues, and a number of other things will fall under the more trust. And so, I think it's probably good for us to discuss that in the round together, rather than lots of separate conversations. But you're right, stop search lead would be a good go-to, and he would be a good part of that. that workshop in.
Great, thanks, Caroline. Appreciate
Yeah.
it.
No probs.
Hubert, did you just have your hand up?
Yes, I did. Thank you. So thank you, Caroline, for that. Very timely. You would have seen an email that's been sent to yourself, Councillor Jogi, and me about putting together a group to discuss the turnaround plan. So, Joe, we need to touch base on that. So I think we could morph what you're suggesting into one. I think for me, it is how neighbourhoods and the use of neighbourhoods tax into improving trust and confidence locally. So yeah, I welcome that discussion. And in addition to that, I think we need to work out how we're going to get that in the strategy as well. So I think that should maybe be a common theme going forward. So we can talk about that at some other point, Caroline. That's okay.
Yeah, great. Okay, that's helpful.
Thank
Thank
you.
you very much. So any other questions from colleagues? No. Okay, Joe, do you?
Yeah, just the last call that I'll be contacting you or Heather and I will contact as many of you as we can over the next coming days. So look out for emails. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And it's just worth saying that a lot of work's being done by Heather and Joe, particularly you as well as AD. So thanks to the team for working on this. It's an important responsibility on us, and reflects a lot of concern, particularly in our borough. So the recommendations at the bottom of this item, you'll see there are two there. Can we note those two recommendations? Yes. Will, you never seem to want to nod when I ask, and I always think you have a very good poker face. Okay, good. All right, helpful. Thank you, folks. Item 9, serious violence duty. Sandy.
Hi there. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm just going to share my screen, so just bear with me for one moment, please. Right. Yeah, if you can let me know when you can see that, please.
Yep, we can see that. That's perfect. Thank you.
Excellent. Great. Thank you very much. So I'm just going to run through very briefly an overview of the new serious violence duty, which some of you may be aware of, but if not, hopefully this will be a chance for everybody to be brought up to speed with the new duty that has now come into force. So essentially, for those who aren't aware, the serious violence duty is a new statutory duty which has been introduced by government through the Police Crime Sentencing Courts Act 2022, and it commenced just over a week ago on the 31st of January of this year. Essentially, this is a brand new statutory duty, and it does place several requirements upon community safety partnerships to do certain things to tackle serious violence. In particular, it includes agreeing a local partnership arrangement to lead on the duty, to produce some consistent data sharing, an analytical process to produce a strategic needs assessment, as well as a production of a strategy in order to set out how the duty is going to be implemented locally. So there is quite a lot of work, it must be said, to be delivered underneath this new statutory duty. And some of those things are listed, as I just said, on the bottom of your screen there, all of which are hopefully aimed at bringing together all of the work that we do already, I suppose, but also some additionality in order to ensure we have a consistent approach to tackling serious violence duty across the entire partnership. So in terms of serious violence, according to the guidance for London, the definition of serious violence for the purpose of the duty has been brought to be any violence, exploitation affecting young people aged under the age of 25, including domestic abuse and sexual violence. And also within the context of these types of violence, it's also been stated that this should include things such as homicide, grievous bodily harm, actual bodily harm, rape, assault by penetration, sexual assault, personal robbery, threats to kill, and also violence commissioned against property during one of these offences. So quite a broad range of offences there, really. It would, for example, encompass some of our street-based violence that takes place in and around the streets of the borough. It also encompasses things like domestic abuse, as well as the sexual violence aspects. So there is quite a broad range of partners and parts of the community safety partnership that clearly need to be playing a key part in order to ensure that we can deliver this duty cohesively and comprehensively in order to hopefully deliver some of those outcomes we're looking to achieve against reducing serious violence as a whole. So the two main parts of the serious violence duty at this stage are firstly a strategic needs assessment. So this is one of the first things which we are required to do as a community safety partnership in order to fulfil the serious violence duty. So the needs assessment, the SNA, is designed essentially to identify and quantify the extent of serious violence that takes place in and around the borough, as well as looking at potential things like causes and drivers of that violence. We also need to be looking to highlight things like the types of individuals, the cohorts, the communities that are most at risk of violence, either as victims or perpetrators, as well as doing things such as uncovering hotspot locations and improving our understanding of violence trends. This clearly is going to require a huge range of data from a vast variety of partners, many of whom are on the call today, and many other partners as well. So a range of data, but also the qualitative information to provide some context. Clearly, then, that data and information needs to be collated together, analysed and produced into an assessment of serious violence. An effective SNA also should highlight some of the gaps in our information and our lack of data in particular areas. So it's about saying what we know, and also about stating what we don't know, and therefore where we might want to do some more work going forward. That then all needs to be used essentially as an evidence base to produce the second part of one of the main requirements of the duty, and that is to produce a local serious violence duty strategy. So using the SNA, using the needs assessment as the evidence base, we will then need to formulate our strategy. And the strategy, which, as I mentioned, is one of the key requirements of the duty, needs to also be reviewed annually once it has been pulled together. And that should comprise of a range of actions that the partnership as a whole, the Community Safety Partnership, is going to take forward to prevent and also reduce serious violence issues. Now, I'm not going to read through all of this, but essentially there are some key points, or some key parts, some key components that need to be included within our strategy. Things like a summary of the work that we're doing, how we're going to work as a partnership to deliver against preventing serious violence, our actions and essentially an action plan, and also our process around reviewing what we're doing on a regular basis. So you can see this is quite a comprehensive strategy that is required of us. In terms of timelines, and as we said, timelines are pretty tight. As I mentioned, the duty came to force on the 31st of January of this year, and we were required almost instantly to apply for to submit rather our expression of interest for some funding, which does come along with this from the Home Office. So we have now put in our expression of interest for some of the funding to support our delivery, and that has now gone in. And there's some other key timeframes as shown on screen here, but some of the key points really are that by January of next year, January of 2024, that's our deadline to both finish and publish our needs assessment and also our serious violence duty strategy. So we have essentially 1 year, 12 months to jointly produce a needs assessment and a strategy, which then needs to be published. And as I mentioned, that then needs to be reviewed on an annual basis. So those are some of our key deliverables, as you can see on screen here. So in terms of the purpose of bringing this today, firstly, just to make everybody aware of the serious violence duty, as clearly it's going to be a significant piece of work that the Community Safety Partnership will need to jointly be undertaking. So firstly, just to make that really bring that to everybody's attention. Also, hopefully to bring this to everybody's attention to hopefully again, an agreement that all partners will support the serious violence duty, for example, the strategic needs assessment and also the strategy by providing data, sharing information, sharing data, and sharing some of that, the analytics that we need to produce both internally and externally across the whole of the Community Safety Partnership and across the partners. So there will be data requests and requests to attend meetings, for example, progress meetings and so on throughout the next year to produce not only the needs assessment, but also strategy. So do please look out for those, and hopefully all partners will be able to contribute towards those. And very finally, there is a discussion point there on screen, which is to really ask what can partners bring to and contribute to the serious violence duty. But Chair, that's the end of the slide deck. I'll hand back over to you for any further points. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm just scribbling this down. What confirms? Okay, fine. Any colleagues have any thoughts? Will and Hubert.
Yeah, I'm happy to kick off, Sandy. That was a really clear presentation, so thank you very much for that. So clearly it's something that we have to do. It is an important area. The 2 points I wanted to make were kind of public health approach and then linked to existing strategies. So just, I suppose, being mindful when we do this of like the risk factors for violence. And we're talking about young people, aren't we, as focus. So some of those sort of early age risk factors, mental health, substance misuse in the family, and whether we would include those. And that kind of leads to my second point, where we've got some existing work on this, like youth at risk, clearly the community safety strategy, violence against women and girls strategy. So just making sure that it all kind of fits together and there's not duplication. And of course, really happy to support the strategy on the question that you bring through our team and the work that we do.
Thank you, Will. Yes, certainly. In terms of the duplication question there, absolutely, that is something which I'm mindful of, and also in some of the meeting that we've already had with the London Violence Reduction Unit, we've highlighted that potential risk of duplication. What we are able to do is, whilst we do need to produce a standalone document, we can utilise existing work that we already have. We can essentially take some of our existing piece of work and include those within the needs assessment and the strategy in order to fulfil those parts of it. So certainly, where possible, I think that's what we should be looking to do, as we already have some really good evidence bases for some of those areas, and we can look to use some of those existing pieces of work to supplement or even to fulfil some of those requirements. So absolutely, that'll be something we'll be able to do, I think.
Thank you. That's really helpful. Hubert.
Thanks, Chair. Will touched on the points I wanted to make. Yes, definitely the public health approach. You know that we've looked at that through our young people at risk strategy regarding early intervention and prevention. Will also touched on the data. You know that public health's got the joint needs strategic assessment, but there's also a lot of data coming out from the Youth Justice Board as well. So it'd be great to make sure we morph those together and definitely link in the overall strategies. I know Jackie's probably on the call as well. I think she would be keen to make sure that the youth element feeds into the duty going forward. But yeah, just really emphasising some of the points made by Will. Thank you.
Thanks, Hubert. Joe, and then Zena Barbazan.
Sorry, Chair, and Hubert and Will. I was going to say something very similar, but I'll say it in a slightly different way. We have discussed this with the VRU, and one of the things that they did say is it's perfectly acceptable for us to align the duty to existing strategies, as I think people have alluded to. So we are very keen to ensure that the action plan that comes out of the strategy is aligned to the action plans that come out of youth at risk, community safety, combating drugs, etc., etc. As we know, there's quite a few strategies in development this year. Sorry, thank you.
Thanks, Joe. Zena?
Yes, I think this is really interesting. Didn't know anything about it, so thank you very much for bringing it. And I mean, some of the points have been made about the need to draw on the existing strategies like youth at risk, youth justice, and so on and so forth. But I'd like to propose another way of looking at this, or suggest that you follow another route. I think we know some of the triggers and stuff start very early on in life. And I think that in looking at a needs assessment and looking at some of the trends and so on, I would invite you, Sandeep, to talk to the people running the children's centres, the early years centres, the family hubs, taking a family health. If we're taking a public health approach and looking at it in the widest context, we'll find many families, I think, some interesting qualitative data, possibly some quantitative data. If you're looking at trends, triggers, and all of that stuff, a lot of this does start in the early years. When we did Sure Start, we certainly took that approach. We've got the family hub opening up at the Triangle, the first one of the four. And I do think that having that integrated approach, the worst that can happen is you don't find out anything. The best that can happen is that you actually uncover some very interesting evidence. And needs and so on, which really we know from experience things do start very early in life. But I don't think often that part of our work in children's is integrated into this sort of thinking. But I think this offers an opportunity to do that, particularly violence against women. We're talking about young people and so on. So that's my first point. The second point is I think you should also make a beeline to talk to people in children's who run social workers in schools. That programme has been incredibly successful. We hope to expand it, but the different way of working and what's being identified with young people as their needs and what's going on, I think is quite revealing. So I don't know if you know Dion. She's the officer leading it and supervising the team. And I think that is these are good starting points. So if you're doing a needs assessment, you want to find out from people what's going on, you know, so you can do desk research and go and talk to people and find out more. So those are my those are a couple of my points. I think which would be, I hope, would be helpful.
Thank you, Councillor. Yep, certainly.
Thanks, Zena. Anybody else? So I'm on my phone. So
Oh, sorry, I don't think
Jackie.
my hand is showing. Sorry, apologies, Councillor Jokey.
Oh, Jackie, yes, go ahead. Hello.
Yeah, thank you. Hi. So, I mean, I agree with all the comments made on you, but you're absolutely right. I think the youth at risk strategy will absolutely feed into this, and we'll be able to pull and draw on that. And I'd definitely be keen to involve young people as we progress this. It was just to let you know, Sandeep, and I'll put the name in the chat, but in relation to the Family Hubs programme, Councillor Grabs makes a really good point, and we are, public health colleagues are developing a needs assessment for us for our Family Hubs programme in conjunction with the Early Intervention Foundation. But I'll put the name of our programme leading, because I think it would be great to talk to them about how we could maybe pull this information together to support how we can deliver against this duty. So I'll put those details in the chat. Thank you.
Thanks, Jackie. That's brilliant. That's very helpful. Okay, any other thoughts, folks? Okay, none indicated. So there are 3 recommendations on the paper, and then there's some of the other wider points that colleagues have raised that we can pick up. So we'll just note that if that's okay. Oh, well, hello. Oh, and Hubert. Yep.
It's just for clarification, is the Community Safety Partnership the governance for this piece of work?
Yes, according to the London guidance, yes, the CSPs are being kind of designated as the leads. Yeah.
And Hubert?
That's probably a legacy hand.
Oh, that's right. Marco, did you have your hand there?
No, it was a question that was answered by. It was a question that was answered during the discussion, so I'm fine.
Cool.
Thank you.
Good. And Joe?
Just on Will's point, Chair, I think this could sit across the joint health and wellbeing and community safety, because I think there is the public health approach has already been mentioned. So maybe we can think about the governance in more detail as we develop the the strategy going forward. But I think it should probably sit across both, personally.
Zena?
Yeah, I just wanted to make another point. So partly about governance, it's also about approach and about how we conduct ourselves. I think what a few in 2018 or 19 was it, Marco, that the rules for safeguarding boards changed, and it was a partnership where every partner had a joint responsibility: health, police, and local authority. So not just local authority and the other 2 being there. It's a joint and shared responsibility. I think when you're looking at this sort of thing, any strategic approach should start that no agency can do it on its own. It may be that the police do the arresting and they do the investigating and all of that, but none of this is just one agency. And that's why cutting across and looking at all these different things going on and going underneath risk, strategies and plans and so on, is really, really important, because we know this doesn't just start. It doesn't start and end with the police. And so I think we should have an approach which embeds and embodies that in the way this is put together. So it is seen as a collectively owned issue, because it is. It is about poverty, about housing, about all the things. So, mental health, well-being, all the stuff we sort of know, but how we frame it, I think, is quite important.
No, I think that's right. I suppose the balance is also just making sure that we have as objective an approach as possible, because things could then slip into, talking around things and lots of different people. So it's having the right people at the table, having those conversations. But that's a really good point. Thank you, Zena. Okay, so we've noted those recommendations. That's item 9. Item 10, any other business? It's quite a short meeting today. I've got one point I'd just like to note before I throw it up to other. Jackie, is that AOB or
It was just to say apologies because I was late to the meeting. We didn't get to do item 7. I don't want to make the meeting any longer, but if you did,
you're quite right. I turned my paper over rather than have it in front of me. You're quite right. Let's come to item 7.
Thank you.
Sorry, you're quite right.
Apologies, colleagues, for lateness here. I think some of you will know that we've got an inspection at the moment, so it's a bit of an all hands on deck approach. So what I'm Thank you. So what I'm bringing to you today is a presentation on the turnaround project. So it's just for noting for members, because we thought it would be something that would be of interest, and it's always good to have a focus on young people at this board as well too. So I'm just going to try and see if I can share it. Is that shown from the start? Should be shown.
Yep, that's perfect. Thank you. Super.
So I won't read it verbatim, I'll just pick out some key points, but it's really just to raise your awareness around this new national initiative that has been given to youth justice across the country. So the Turning Around project is a new project that's funded over 3 years, and essentially it's focusing on developing a prevention arm within youth justice services, so that they're not just solely focused on the statutory element, which is when young people already come into the system, and having more of a focus on working with young people who are on the edge of becoming involved in offending behaviour, or certainly something that we've been trying to do within our youth justice service for a long time is to target younger siblings and known associates of young people open to the youth justice service, with an aim of trying to reduce their offending behaviour and reduce that risk going forward. The difference with this programme is that not only is it about targeting those young people who are at risk of offending, it's about developing that whole family approach right at the start. So it's focused on team around the family, multi-agency, looking at wider families' needs, and knowing that if we can move to a model of addressing all of the needs within a family, then it ultimately reduces risk for that young person in the home. And that's something that's very well established within the Early Help Service and aligns with our early help strategy, underpinned by the National Support and Families Programme. So we're very pleased actually to see this as a methodology and a way of working going forward. In terms of this programme, it's voluntary, so we can't mandate anyone. It isn't something that can be mandated through the courts. There is an expectation that it doesn't last longer than a year, because if you're not making that impact after a year, then you really should be considering is a more statutory response required. And it will not double fund any existing arrangements that are in place. So for example, in Haringey, we have the SAFE task force, and we also have the AP task force. Those are both projects that are working with young people at risk of exclusion as a result of offending behaviour. So although there's a similar theme, we would not be able to work with those young people who are already counted as part of that cohort. And this is a programme that absolutely will be subject to robust evaluation in terms of making the difference. I very much see this, from everything that we've been reading, that this will be a pilot of what could be continuation funding beyond the 3 years. So we've been allocated just over 360,000. It says 22 to 25. We've only just received year one's funding, as you do sometimes with these national programmes, in the last month or so. So we've had a very short window to spend this funding, but fortunately we had already been developing a prevention model within the borough anyway, and it's to support 120 children and young people. We had started this work as a result of building on some work that we had done with Woodside Primary School. So we had been doing some analysis of the referrals into the out of court team, and what we'd found was there were a number of young people, students, being referred from Woodside because they had been found in possession of a knife. We also found that those young people tended to be permanently excluded automatically, and we knew that Woodside wanted to work with us to support to address this issue. We also overlaid this pilot with the data and the findings from the thematic inspection across the country around education and young people at risk of or involved in offending behaviour. And within that report, there was 181 young people who were looked at within the youth justice services across the country in relation to this area of work. And they found that very few of those young people had a plan that were focused on their education aspirations, or if they did, it was very generic and not specific to that young person. The report also found that a number of young people, and particularly those who were dual heritage, had poorer educational outcomes, and some of their recommendations were clear that these young people should not be subject to part-time timetables for a long period of time, that they should be short-term only. In terms of the pilot, we started it in September, it ran to December, phase 1, and we're now in phase 2. And we worked with 6 young people who were chosen by the school. Youth justice workers worked with them on a one-to-one. It was consent-based with their family's agreement. And the objective was for these young people to remain in school and to reduce their offending behaviour. So they were identified by the school because there was risk of exclusion as a result of offending behaviour, essentially. The work focused on looking at consequential thinking, making better decisions, peer pressure, how to focus on remaining within lessons and making positive choices. In terms of the impact, what we found from the young people and where we are now is, through those interventions, young people talked about how they felt they were not understood by their teachers, how they felt that decisions were made very quickly for them to be sent out of class, and fundamentally how they all wanted to remain in school. And we shared that feedback with the school on a termly basis, and what that resulted in is a learning space being created for staff where we could talk to them about the experience of young people, but it also resulted in different interventions and strategies being developed with young people going forward. What we found some of the outcomes to be is that each school is different, but within this school, that those young people had a reduction in the behaviour points that they would normally receive. So we'd like to think that that's absolutely had a direct impact as a result of its intervention, and something we're keen to continue. So we see the Turnaround Project as building on that type of intervention that we've started in Woodside Primary School. We have a triage assessment that we'll be developing, and it'll be very much focused on whole family. So within the Youth Justice Service currently, in terms of the statutory work, the focus is solely on the young person. It does also support the wider family, but it's more about the young person, whereas this model will look at whole family assessment and working with everyone in that family model. We're accepting referrals directly at the moment for this programme whilst we're developing our pathways, and we're making sure all of the information is recorded within our youth justice system, which is called ChildView. We have a target of 17 young people to meet to provide this service for in year 1, and then the remaining 103 over the next 2 years. And we do have a launch event planned in March, but it's a soft launch in terms of communicating to partners about referral pathways. This is the criteria, so I'll leave it there at your leisure to read, but essentially it is very much targeting young people who are not within the criminal justice system already. So a lot of these you'll be familiar with in terms of where they might have been through a court process, but the outcome has been not founded, or it's prior to a court process. In terms of whether you absolutely cannot accept young people onto this programme, is they cannot already work, we can't work with them if they already have an existing early help assessment, which I did find quite strange because I would have thought that would have been the pivotal point, but I think it's about introducing this model of working going forward. We can work with young people who have a child in need plan open to safeguarding, but only if it's clear that this intervention would be able to address an unmet need. And we can't work with any young person who is open to a child protection plan or looked after or a care leaver. So in terms of the pathways, as I said, at the moment, we're taking referrals directly, and we've communicated to our key partners so they know how to access that programme. But going forward, we see the key partners referring to this will be our neighbourhood police and colleagues, our schools, community safety colleagues, and self-referral. And we already have something called the Early Help Panel in existence, which is a weekly panel that comes together to look at referrals that have either come through the MASH or come to them directly, where there are concerns about young people on a range of areas, but it doesn't meet the safeguarding threshold. So what we want to do is tie it all together so that we do have one straightforward mechanism to access this service going forward. Also, now the Turnaround Project is an intervention that is offered at the point of the Early Help Panel. So even if we haven't had a referral for the Turnaround programme, if we identify that a young person would benefit from that as a result of a different reason for being referred, then we would pick them up through that route too. So we already have a prevention team within the Youth Justice Service, but what we're using the funding for is to extend it. So where you see it in green is these are posts that are already funded within our Youth Justice Service budget. So we're already doing this work anyway, but actually taking it, stretching it and expanding it based on the model that we've developed from Woodside, we're going to be using the funding to pay for another prevention officer, to contribute to a team manager's post, and to pay for evidence-based interventions. It's very clear that we have to ensure that we're doing things that are robustly evidence-based, and that will cost some money in terms of training staff to deliver those interventions, but also to commission them going forward. So in terms of the governance, it will be provided through our Youth Justice Partnership Boards. We already have an annual plan, and this will be a feature of that plan going forward. And we will have to submit quarterly evaluations to the Ministry of Justice. We also can, on request, maybe annually or more regularly if you want, we can bring back a progress report here. We tend to bring an item on young people throughout the year anyway, maybe that we can add that onto this. And we'll make sure that whilst we shouldn't be duplicating with Safe Task Force and AP, we will be working closely with them to make sure that we are avoiding that duplication, but we're developing some consistent methodology and consistent standards. And that's just the contact, the officers who are directly involved in this work. Happy to take any questions. I'm going to try and turn my camera on because of Wi-Fi. Okay.
Thank you, Jackie. That's really helpful and very interesting. Any questions, colleagues? So I'm having to lean over because I had to charge my phone because that's what I look like I'm sitting. Caroline and then Hubert and then Will.
Yeah, thanks, Jackie. Really interesting. I was just wondering what involvement police have in the project, specifically with the interventions with these young people, because some of the feedback that that we get quite consistently is around young people's first contact or repeated contact with police is quite negative. And although you'll know we're in every secondary school, with primary we don't have that footprint. So I'm just keen on building where we can, and I know the cohort for year one's quite small, just building that positive, a series of positive experiences for those young people with sort of the humanising the police officer role rather than it being associated with negative experience, and whether that's already part of it or could we explore that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, my understanding is that in developing the local approach, there has been a lot of liaison with Jazz Corps and neighbourhood police and community policing, and also our seconded officers into the youth justice. But I can definitely follow that up, Caroline, just to make sure that those colleagues are involved. And I think what you're describing is part of the bigger piece of work that we're doing with our police colleagues around stop and search too, you know, making sure that those interactions are meaningful and more positive. So yeah, I can take that back. Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Jackie. Really, really good presentation, a good piece of work, and really clear about the work that's been done. I guess my comment was linked kind of to the discussions we had earlier in the meeting around prevention. So we're talking about primary school kids carrying knives, and it just looked like, what are the kind of common features? Are there any opportunities, not through this project, but other work that we're doing where we could be looking, you know, what are we doing in nursery, what are we doing in reception for these kids earlier in primary school? So just, yeah, why were they carrying the knives? What's kind of what's behind that, I guess?
Yeah, and I would be lying if I said I could tell you that answer. I think it's something to have to go away and understand the analysis. And what I would say, Will, is that this is one of a number of interventions, and it's the youth at risk strategy that will really focus on that whole life course approach, really. I don't know if Hubert's mentioned it earlier, and it might be an item to bring to a future meeting, but we are refreshing the action plan for the youth at risk strategy, so we can be very focused on what are the main type of interventions, what do we expect the key performance indicators and the impact to be. And so this will be one of a number of interventions, and part of that will be a refreshed needs analysis to understand some of those things that you've just highlighted.
Thank you.
Thanks, Hubert.
Thanks, Chair. My hand wasn't up, but I feel.
I don't know what's going on. It keeps telling me that your hand's going up.
No, but I have got a question, so just
let him speak.
So, Jackie, I'm just interested in the communities element of this. Obviously, you know that a lot of our pros have got lived history and might have been weapon carriers themselves in their younger days. I was wondering, how does that fit into that work? And yes, I was going to mention the work we're doing around refreshing the young people risk strategy. I know that we've done work in the past about why our young people carry weapons, and it is very diverse and very complex, as you know, and not all of it particularly around safety, interestingly enough. Yeah, just the community element, and will that morph into the work that you're doing as well?
Yeah, I mean, you're right. We have done some work on understanding the reasons for that. I don't know if it's time to revisit that, but there has been some work done previously. In terms of the community element, I mean, with this programme in particular, I don't think we will be struggling for referrals, because when we based it on the data in terms of those released under investigation, we had the cohort twice over to do, you know, to support this program, but we know that that's something that we're moving away from in terms of reporting. Our focus will be that we will target those who are younger siblings or associates of those already known who are not within the criminal justice system already, because we know those are the ones that are at risk, and we will build on you know, like what we've started on the Wood side. But you raise a really good point, because I don't think we would have the capacity to increase it in the way that we would want to across the communities. It's something that we will have to think about, really, because we think that those two methods alone will give us, will meet the cohort requirements, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't do these interventions on a more wider scale. So it's something for us to think about, really, about how we tie in to the other work. But like I say, it's one of a number of interventions within youth at risk. I guess it's about using the learning and maybe looking to share that across other interventions.
The reason why I say that is if I go to some of my community members in Broadwater Farm or Farm Park, they will say to me, "This young Uber, I've seen him ride around on a bike late at night. Can we work with him?" So just, you know, maybe not open it widely, but maybe go to some of our senior community partners and say, "Do you know what? I know you've spoken about Uber, who's always on the estate. Maybe pick them up through that way," and that will really be, you know, might be in the system already, if I'm honest, but I think that would be bringing that, drawing that community element, which I think will be interesting. So just, I can talk to you about that offline, Jackie.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome.
Great, super. Okay, thank you. Joe, your hand's up.
Yeah, just a really quick question, Jackie. It's about, I think I read somewhere about double funding. And I'm just wondering if there'll be any impacts on kind of any other funding, for example, that has been secured through, for example, the Violence Reduction Unit or through LCPF or other funding that might impact on that. And do we need to have a conversation about what that looks like in the round and whether that, I'm not sure. Maybe it's just for individuals, but I know that there is some funding sort of in already in place and in the pipeline. So I'm just interested in that. Really.
Yeah, so it won't impact on things that are reaching a wider landscape like VREU funding, but what it meant was is that AP Task Force has to work with 50 young people. I think Safe Task Force has to work with 120, and we just can't have the same young people in those programs that are in this one. What we'll have to do is we'll have to develop a mechanism that identifies those young people, because nor would we want one young person having 3 interventions. But no, it won't impact on things like that.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Jackie. Thanks, Joe. Okay, I think that's Hubert's name is still covered in yellow boxes. So, but he texts me saying he doesn't want to speak. So let's now move on, and we can note that that presentation. Thank you, Jackie, and good luck for the next 3 weeks, or the rest of the 3 weeks, I should say. Okay, that was item 7. We'll now go back to item 10. Which is any other business. And the one thing I want to say is, I suppose, more of a reflection, really, which is, and Hubert alluded to this earlier, but I think it's just thinking about how we make best use of these meetings and how we make best value of everyone's time. So Caroline and I and Andy Donald, the chief exec, are going to try and get together sooner rather than later, just to try and see how we can perhaps change structure or change. I mean, there's obviously there's statutory things we have to go through and engage with, and that's all fine. But I think we also want to make sure that what we are talking about is relevant and live and topical, and responding to events, not just talking in the abstract. So just to share with colleagues that Caroline and I, as co-chairs, will be looking at how we can, I suppose, make this even fitter for purpose. If that makes sense. I mean, I don't know if anyone wants to say anything on that, but I think, I've done this job now for 6 months. This is, I think, the 3rd CSP we've had since then. And to me personally, I think there's things we could do differently. And Caroline's relatively new too, so it's a good chance to have 2 new co-chairs to help shake things up a little bit. So just to say that there'll be some, gentle conversations happening behind the scenes to make some progress on that front. Hubert.
Hand is up now.
Yeah, but now the yellow's gone. Anyway, whatever's going on, I don't know.
I was thinking that maybe we can visit other CSPs. It's always something that I've wanted to take some time out. So I don't know if Andy, yourself, or Caroline's got some suggestion of CSPs that's considered to be, I don't know, exemplar of good practice. Maybe something we can do is just do a roll around and go and visit them. Just a suggestion, Chip.
Sure, no, that's really helpful. So look, I expect you to be part of that conversation, Hubert. So if any others have any thoughts, just drop Caroline and I an email, and we can. Councillor Babazon, who has to leave in 2 minutes. You want the last word?
I am, definitely. But I always have a thought about things. Sorry. I do think this needs a reviving. I do. I agree with you. And I really welcome the fact that you're putting your heads together. One of the things I might throw in is an idea about maybe being a bit more thematic. So yes, you have to have all the reports on data, this, that and the other. But there may be a way of looking at, through the CSP, because it's a strategic partnership and brings different services together, maybe some thematic issues where we can explore how we can do things better together. I understand what's going on. So if you think of policing and the environment, for example, loads of angles about engaging with policing, the importance of neighbourhood policing, community, how we maintain our environment, trading standards, all those sorts of things. I think there are some topics that are never talked about, which do impact on people, and where we might want to have a refreshed discussion. I know that I've talked to Joe, for example, it's a little hobby horse of mine, Caroline, so I do apologise, but about licensing and
Zena,
impacts on neighbours. So those are sorts of issues I'd like to see you explore.
Sure.
That's it, Adam.
You are on the list of people to speak to, so we can have a proper conversation.
Okay.
And that list is in my head. It's not written down yet, so it's always open for amendments. But
Anyway.
yeah, look, we want to make sure that colleagues who sit around this table feel that it's above and beyond, as I say, the statutory nature of our responsibilities, but it's as worthwhile as possible. So Caroline and I will be in touch with everyone to try and see how things can look in the coming months and years. Good.
Change agent partnership. Yes.
Yes, exactly. We want, fit for purpose, as I say. Okay. That's item 10. I don't believe any other items, any other business for anyone. No. Okay. Good. Item 11 will be dates of future meetings. That's yet to be confirmed, so we can be in touch with colleagues. Because I know that and just to say actually on this, the email that Hubert noted, the chief executive sent earlier, will at the conversation that we're going to have about how we do things may not be done in time for the next meeting, but if we can do things in such a way to make the next meeting the beginning of how we do things differently, then we can try. But we will come back to colleagues when we know what the diary looks like. Naz, do you want to say anything?
Yeah, just early June is the next scheduled one, usually.
That's actually give us plenty of time to get things going. Good. Well, thank you, everybody. And we now have 1 hour and 52 minutes earlier than the 5 o'clock scheduled finish. So there's plenty of time for emails and further meetings. Thanks very much.
Thanks all.
Thank you. Thanks all.
Cheers. Bye.